Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Science Channel. Tonight, we wander into the powerful and enduring world of bison, animals that once moved across entire continents in numbers almost beyond belief. These are creatures of weight and motion, of strength and survival, shaped by wind, snow, and open land. For thousands of years, they have shaped the very ground beneath them, leaving lasting marks on ecosystems, cultures, and history itself. There is something captivating about them. Not just their size or their presence, but the way they belong so completely to the landscapes they inhabit. Their story moves from vast abundance through the edge of disappearance and into a slow and remarkable return. It is a story that stretches from the Ice Age to the present day, carried forward in every step they take. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is settle in. Let your shoulders soften and notice your eyes grow heavy. And as the day begins to gently fade away, join me as we explore this vast and powerful world together. Let's begin. A running bison can outrun most humans with ease. That fact can feel almost absurd at first. We tend to look at all that weight and imagine slowness, as if sheer size must come with hesitation. But when one decides to move, the illusion disappears in an instant. These animals can reach about 40 miles an hour, which means the same creature that seems heavy as stone can suddenly surge forward with the force of a launched vehicle. What makes that speed so startling is the contrast. There is no sleek antelope shape here, no obvious design for quickness. Instead, there is a shaggy front end, a lowered head, and a body that looks built for endurance alone. Then it breaks into a run, and the whole picture changes. This is why people who treat them casually in parks make such dangerous mistakes. Distance feels safe until a few seconds prove otherwise, and by then the lesson has already arrived. Bison once thundered across the plains in unimaginable numbers. Try to picture a horizon that does not end with sky and grass alone, but with moving bodies, dark backs, and drifting dust. Before the great collapse of the 19th century, tens of millions ranged across a huge sweep of North America. Accounts from that era describe columns so vast they could delay travel for hours, and herds so dense they seemed to turn the prairie into motion itself. This was not a scattering of animals across an empty landscape. It was one of the great wildlife spectacles the modern world has ever lost. Their movements pressed trails into the earth, cropped grass in shifting patterns, and fed cultures whose lives were deeply bound to them. The sound must have been unforgettable. Hooves over dry ground, calves calling, bulls grunting. To witness even a fraction of that abundance would have changed forever what a person thought a continent could hold. Bison are the biggest land mammals in North America. Stand beside one in your imagination, and the scale becomes almost hard to hold in your mind. A full-grown bull can weigh around a ton, with a chest like a wall and a head that seems built from packed earth and muscle. Its size is only part of what makes this animal so arresting. It carries that mass on open ground where there is nowhere to hide, and still it dominates the landscape simply by existing in it. Long before roads, fences, and cities, these giants moved across plains, parklands, and river valleys as living landmarks. To the people and predators around them, they were not just another grazer. They were among the most imposing presences on the continent. Even now, when one lifts its shoulders above the grass, it can make the land itself feel older, wider, and far more alive. Despite their bulk, bison can pivot with startling speed. This is one of the most deceptive things about them. They do not merely run fast in a straight line. They can also turn far more sharply than their shape suggests, which gives them a kind of explosive agility that catches people off guard. Much of that ability comes from a body built around power in the front half, with strong limbs and a low center that lets them shift direction quickly when they need to. In practical terms, this means you cannot judge safety by assuming you can sidestep one. A person may see a broad animal grazing with its head down and imagine a slow, predictable movement. Then the body twists, the shoulders swing, and the distance vanishes with frightening efficiency. It is a reminder that wild strength is not always elegant to look at. Sometimes it arrives wrapped in mass, hair, and silence, and only reveals its speed when it is already in motion. A bison's hump is pure muscle built for power. That great rise above the shoulders is not a store of fat, and it is not there for show. It is formed by towering vertebrae and thick muscle that anchor the neck and forequarters, creating one of the animal's most distinctive and useful features. This is a working structure, built for force. It helps drive the head through snow in winter, supports the front heavy build, and turns the entire animal into a machine for pushing, plowing, and endurance. Once you know that, the silhouette changes. What first looks strange starts to make deep sense. This is the shape of an animal designed by open country and hard seasons. It does not need delicacy. It needs leverage. It needs strength where the storm hits first. In that hump, you can almost read the environments that shaped it. Wind, drifts, frozen ground, and months when survival depended on the ability to force a path toward buried food. Baby bison are born with bright orange coats. For the first days of life, they can look almost unreal against the darker herd, like little sparks moving through a field of weathered brown. People often call them red dogs, and once you see one, the nickname makes perfect sense. The color does not last. As the calf grows, that vivid coat darkens, and the young animal begins to resemble the adults around it. But in those early weeks, the brightness makes each one stand out as a fresh arrival in a world of hooves, horns, and constant motion. It also changes the emotional feel of the herd. A group of massive grazers suddenly reveals its softer center, because among the bulls and cows are these small, bright creatures, learning to stand, follow, nurse, and keep pace. They are born into movement almost immediately. There is no long, sheltered infancy on the prairie, only the urgent beginning of life out in the open. Bison can survive blizzards that would stop many animals cold. Winter on the plains is not a simple drop in temperature. It is exposure, wind, buried food, and storms that can erase the ground itself. Yet these animals are built to meet that kind of season head-on. Their dense winter coats trap warmth. Their heavy forequarters let them keep moving when conditions turn harsh. Their bodies do not ask the landscape to become kinder. They meet it as it is. One of the most striking sights in bison country is an animal resting through a storm with snow gathering on its back, as if the weather belongs there. That image tells you something important. This is not endurance in the human sense of gritting through discomfort. It is adaptation written into fur, bone, and behavior over long time. Where cattle may need shelter and help, these survivors can remain on the land, absorbing punishment from the season that helped make them what they are. Their shaggy heads work like snowplows through deep winter drifts. When the prairie is buried, survival depends on reaching what lies underneath. Instead of giving up when grass disappears beneath snow, these animals lower the head and drive forward, using the skull, neck, and shoulder power of the front end to sweep drifts aside. It is a simple action, but it reveals an entire design philosophy in the body. The head is carried low for a reason. The shoulders are massive for a reason. Winter is not an interruption in their story. It is one of the main forces that shaped it. There is something almost mechanical in the image, though the reality is older and more elegant than any machine. A living animal becomes a tool of its own survival, clearing a path with anatomy shaped over countless seasons. Beneath the snow lies grass. Beneath the grass lies stored summer sunlight. And through strength alone, they can still reach it when the land looks sealed shut. Bison helped shape entire grasslands just by grazing and moving. They were never just passengers in the prairie. Wherever they fed, rested, trampled, and passed through, the land responded. Their grazing clipped some patches short and left others taller. Their hooves broke crusted soil. Their dung fed insects and returned nutrients to the ground. Their wallows created small, disturbed places where different plants and tiny communities could take hold. Over time, all that movement helped create a richer, more varied mosaic than a uniform field could ever be. This is one reason their return matters so much now. Bringing them back is not simply about saving a famous mammal. It is about restoring a process. Grasslands evolved with the rhythm of large grazers moving across them, and many species learned to live within that changing pattern. Once you see that, the animal becomes bigger in meaning. It is no longer only a creature on the prairie. It is one of the forces that helped build the prairie itself. America's national mammal was once pushed terrifyingly close to extinction. This part of the story lands with special force because the fall happened so fast. An animal that had once existed in astonishing abundance was driven down within a few decades by commercial slaughter, habitat loss, and deliberate destruction tied to westward expansion. By the late 19th century, only small remnants remained. The great herds that had seemed almost permanent were reduced to scattered survivors. That collapse was not inevitable. It was human-made, and people living through it knew they were watching something enormous disappear. The fact that the species still exists at all is due to a narrow rescue carried forward by a handful of private herd keepers, public refuges, later conservation work, and the continuing commitment of indigenous communities and others working to restore them. So when this animal was named the national mammal in 2016, the title carried more than symbolism. It carried memory, warning, and a measure of unfinished repair. Bison are not buffalo, even though many people call them that. The name is so common that many people never realize it is technically wrong. True buffalo live in Africa and Asia. They include animals like the water buffalo and the Cape buffalo, which belong to different branches of the bovine family tree. The great shaggy animals of North America are bison, with a body plan all their own. Once you notice the difference, it becomes obvious. The shoulders rise into that great muscular hump. The head sits lower and heavier. The coat is thicker in front and thinner behind, giving the whole creature a shape that feels almost carved by weather. The confusion came from early European encounters, when unfamiliar animals were matched to familiar names. The label stayed, even after naturalists understood better. So when people say buffalo, they are repeating a historical mistake that became a tradition. The real animal is stranger, older in presence, and far more distinctly North American than the borrowed word suggests. Two main kinds still live today, plains and wood bison. At first glance, they can seem like two versions of the same story, but each belongs to a different landscape. Plains bison are the animals most people imagine when they think of sweeping grasslands and immense herds moving under open skies. Wood bison come from farther north, tied to boreal forests, meadows, river valleys, and rougher country where space feels wilder and more enclosed. That difference in setting matters. One form is shaped by the broad prairie. The other carries the imprint of northern habitat, longer winters, and a more rugged way of life. To know there are two living kinds is to realize that this animal did not belong to one single backdrop. It was flexible enough to occupy very different worlds across the continent. That alone makes it more impressive. It was not just a beast of one famous ecosystem. It was a large survivor spread across multiple North American realms, each demanding its own kind of strength. Wood bison are larger and heavier than plains bison. The difference is not just a number on a chart. It changes the whole impression of the animal. Wood bison often appear taller, longer-legged, and even more imposing through the front, as if the northern landscape asked for an extra measure of scale. Their bodies carry a certain rangy power that fits a life among muskegs, forest openings, and remote valleys. When people picture the largest living land mammal in North America, they are often picturing an ordinary representative of the species. In fact, the northern form can push that image even further. It is a reminder that the continent once supported not just one iconic giant, but variations shaped by geography and climate. There is something thrilling in that. Even within an already formidable animal, evolution found room to make one form grander still. The north did not shrink the bison. In some places it made it larger, heavier, and perhaps even more unforgettable. A bull bison can weigh as much as a small car. That comparison lands because it drags the animal into the modern world. It forces the mind to measure a living creature against something mechanical, manufactured, and familiar. A mature bull can easily push past the weight of many compact vehicles, yet all of that mass is carried on legs, directed by instinct and brought to life by muscle and breath. It is one thing to hear that an animal is heavy. It is another to realize that what looks like a moving hill beside the road may weigh about as much as the machine you drove in. Then, another thought follows close behind. Unlike a car, this mass can accelerate, turn, lower its head, and decide where it wants to be. It is not passive weight. It is force with intention behind it. That is part of what makes a close encounter so unforgettable. You are not merely near something large. You are near something immense that is fully alive. Bison calves can stand and walk within hours of birth. There is no long grace period on the prairie. A newborn arrives into a world of distance, weather, and constant movement, and the body has to respond almost immediately. Within a surprisingly short time, the small legs begin to work, wobbling at first, then finding rhythm as the calf rises and follows its mother. That early ability is not a charming bonus. It is survival written into development. Herd life does not stop for one infant. The group moves, grazes, shifts position, and reacts to danger, so the young must be able to keep up before the day is old. There is something deeply moving in that first effort. A creature new to the world is already learning motion, balance, and belonging. It is born not into shelter, but into a moving society on open ground. From the very first hours, life means joining the herd and matching its pace as best it can. Their massive heads stay low because they evolved for sweeping snow. That posture is so familiar that many people assume it is simply part of the animal's look, like a mane or a horn. In reality, it tells a story about winter pressure and practical design. A low carried head works with the heavy neck and powerful shoulders to create a living plow, built to push into drifts and expose the plants hidden below. Once you understand that, the silhouette becomes beautifully logical. This is not awkwardness, it is purpose. The body holds itself in the shape that made survival more likely when food disappeared beneath snow for long stretches of the year. there is also a kind of harsh elegance in it. The animal does not wait for the land to offer up an easy meal. It meets resistance with anatomy. In every winter posture, you can read an old argument between hunger and weather and see how the bison answered it with strength, leverage, and patience. Bison eyes sit wide apart, giving them a broad view. That placement changes how the world comes to them. Instead of focusing narrowly on one point ahead, they take in a wide sweep of space, which is exactly what life in open country demands. On the plains, danger may not announce itself from the front. It can emerge from the side, from behind movement in grass, or from changes in the behavior of the herd. A broad field of vision helps an animal notice more of that shifting world without constantly turning its head. It suits a creature that lives in groups and reads its surroundings through both motion and position. There is a pleasing tension in this design. The face looks heavy, grounded, and forward-built, yet the eyes are arranged for awareness across the edges of the landscape. It makes sense of the animal's alert stillness. What looks like calm watching may in fact be a wide visual survey, gathering far more information than we realize. Their beards and thick forequarters make them look even larger. Some animals gain presence by height, some by length. This one gains it by front-loaded drama. The beard, mane, and great mass of the shoulders create an impression of scale that begins before the real measurements do. Even at a distance, the shape can feel oversized, almost exaggerated, as if the front of the body has been built to overwhelm the eye. That visual power matters. In the wild, appearance can influence rivals, predators, and even the way humans remember what they have seen. The animal looks formidable because formidable was useful. The heavy front end speaks of combat, digging through winter and raw physical authority. Meanwhile, the beard adds to the sense of age and force, making even a still animal appear charged with intention. It is one of the reasons bison seem so unforgettable in silhouette. They are not merely big. They are built in a way that makes bigness feel concentrated. Bison shed huge mats of fur when warmer weather arrives. As winter loosens its grip, the animal begins to change before your eyes. The heavy insulation that made cold bearable starts to peel away in ragged sheets and clumps, hanging from the body like old weather being stripped off. It can make the animal look almost untidy for a time, as if the prairie itself is shedding through it. That rough, transitional look is strangely compelling. Beneath the long winter hair, a sleeker summer coat is waiting, better suited to heat, insects, and movement through a greener world. This seasonal shift makes the body feel responsive in a very visible way. You are watching adaptation happen on the surface. The same creature that seemed wrapped for blizzard country begins to look made for open, warm days. It is also one more reminder that the bison is built not for one season, but for a cycle, carrying winter when needed and then releasing it when the year turns. Birds sometimes line their nests with loose bison wool. There is something beautiful in the scale of that connection. A huge grazer crosses the prairie, and from its body come soft fibers that smaller lives gather and weave into places of shelter. During shedding season, clumps of hair can catch on shrubs, grasses, or rough ground, where birds may pull at them and carry them away. What was once insulation against cold becomes lining for eggs and chicks. It is a quiet exchange, easy to miss unless you stop and think about how ecosystems work in detail. The largest land mammal on the continent is, in a small but meaningful way, helping furnish nests. That image changes the animal's role. It is no longer only a Greek presence moving through a landscape. It is also a contributor to intimate little structures hidden in branches and grass. Even the fur it leaves behind can continue working, entering the lives of creatures small enough to fit in one hand. Bison can jump surprisingly high for such enormous animals. This is the kind of fact that resets the imagination. Weight usually makes us think of grounding, of downward force, of something too heavy to lift far from the earth. But these animals can clear barriers that many people would never expect, lifting all that mass in one abrupt surge. It is not graceful in the way a deer seems graceful, yet that is part of the astonishment. The jump feels improbable because the body does not advertise it. It looks built to hold ground, not to leave it. And yet it can. For anyone trying to picture what it means to underestimate a wild animal, this is a useful place to start. Fences that look reassuring may not be much of an answer. Apparent heaviness may say nothing about what the body can actually do. A bison carries hidden athleticism inside a frame we tend to read too simply, and that mismatch makes the reality all the more impressive. They are powerful swimmers and can cross rivers with ease. It is tempting to imagine them as creatures bound to dry land alone, almost made from the same stuff as soil and grass. Yet, water is not the kind of boundary that automatically stops them. With strong bodies and steady drive, they can enter rivers and make their way across, turning what might look like an obstacle into part of the route. This matters because their world was never a neat map of separate zones. It included crossings, seasonal movements, and decisions made in landscapes threaded with streams and broad channels. A river for a bison could be something to pass through rather than circle around. The image is magnificent. A dark head over moving water, shoulders pressing forward, current breaking against the body. It reminds you that this animal is not only massive, but capable across different conditions. Prairie giant, yes, but also river crosser, carrying its weight through water with a confidence that seems almost impossible. Bison often roll in dirt to create shallow hollows called wallows. At first, it can look playful, even comic, this enormous animal dropping down and grinding its body into dust. But the act leaves a mark on the land, and repeated use turns that mark into a recognizable feature. A wallow is a shallow depression formed where bodies have rolled, twisted, and pressed against the ground again and again. The reasons can include comfort, dusting the coat, easing irritation, and seasonal behavior, but the effect reaches beyond the moment. The animal has taken a plain patch of earth and physically reshaped it. That is one of the fascinating things about large grazers. Even their ordinary habits can leave geography behind. Across old bison country, wallows became part of the lived texture of the prairie, familiar enough to be noticed by people who knew the land well. A resting place, a rubbing place, a sign that heavy life passed this way and altered the soil. Those wallows can become tiny habitats for other prairie life. Once the ground is disturbed and pressed into a hollow, the story does not end with the bison getting back to its feet. The depression begins to interact with weather, seeds, insects, moisture, and light in its own way. Rain may collect there. Different plants may gain a foothold. Small creatures may use the altered patch for shelter, feeding, or movement. In a vast landscape, that tiny basin can become a little world with conditions unlike the grass around it. This is one of the most remarkable things about ecological influence. It does not always come from dramatic acts. Sometimes it comes from repetition, from one behavior performed over time until it creates opportunities for other lives. The result is a prairie with more texture and more variety than it would otherwise have. A place where the rolling body of a giant has consequences that continue long after the dust settles, and the herd has moved on. A bison's tongue is strong enough to strip grasses fast. Grazing can look peaceful from a distance, almost sleepy, but the mechanics are efficient and forceful. The tongue works like a tough, skillful tool, helping gather and pull vegetation with speed that fits an animal needing to process large amounts of low-growing food. There is no dainty picking here. The feeding style suits broad grasslands and a body built to live on what those grasslands offer in abundance. That strength also helps explain how these animals can make such visible use of a patch in a relatively short time. They are not nibbling for decoration. They are harvesting. The image grows even more impressive when you remember how many mouths once moved across the continent at once. Campless tongues, campless bites, and entire expanses responding to their passage. What seems like a small anatomical detail turns out to be part of a continent-scale process, linking mouth, muscle, grass, and land in one ongoing rhythm. They spend much of the day eating and chewing slowly. To such dramatic animals, much of life is devoted to a rhythm that seems almost meditative. Grazing, pausing, chewing, swallowing, resting, and then beginning again. Yet within that steady cycle lies the entire logic of survival for a large herbivore. Grass is abundant, but it is not rich in the way flesh is rich. To turn it into muscle, motion, and winter endurance takes time, patience, and a digestive strategy built around repetition. There is something compelling in that contrast. The same animal that can run hard, face storms, and dominate the horizon also spends long stretches in an activity that looks nearly tranquil. It reminds you that power in the natural world is often supported by patient routines rather than constant drama. The great shoulders and horns may command attention, but much of the body's real work happens in these quieter hours, when food is gathered steadily and the day is built mouthful by mouthful. Bison are ruminants, which means they digest food in stages. The grass does not simply go in and become strength by magic. It passes through a complex internal process designed to squeeze nutrition from tough plant matter that many animals could not use so well. Food is first swallowed with speed, then later brought back up and chewed again as cud, giving the body another chance to break it down before it moves deeper through the digestive system. This is one of the hidden marvels behind the bison's entire way of life. A continent famous for grass produced one of its most iconic animals, partly through a stomach built for patience, recycling, and microbial collaboration. Inside the calm exterior is a slow chemistry lab working around the clock. That is why scenes of resting animals chewing are more interesting than they first appear. They are not idling. They are continuing a second round of extraction, turning rough plants into energy through a process both ancient and extremely effective. Their broad muzzles are built for grazing, not delicate browsing. Body design always gives clues about a creature's preferred world, and the face tells this story clearly. A broad muzzle suits an animal meant to take in a swath of low vegetation at a time, working close to the ground where grasses grow thick. This is very different from the narrower, more selective feeding style of animals that pick leaves, twigs, or shrubs, one choice at a time. In other words, the face is built for bulk harvest rather than careful sampling. That matters because it ties the animal directly to the ecology of open grassland. You can almost see the prairie in the muzzle itself. It belongs to an eater of broad reaches, not one that threads delicately through branches. This kind of fit between anatomy and habitat is one of the pleasures of natural history. The more closely you look, the more the body seems to explain the landscape, and the landscape seems to explain the body. Bison prefer grasses, but they also eat sedges and herbs. Even a famous grazer is not locked into one single plant. The main diet is built around grasses, yet the menu can widen to include sedges and herbaceous plants when conditions, season, and place make them useful. That flexibility matters more than it may seem. It means the animal is not simply tied to one narrow feeding script. It can respond to what the land is offering and make use of variation within the broader grassland world. In practical terms, That helps explain how bison lived across such an enormous range of habitats and weather patterns. A rigid eater would have been easier for the landscape to defeat. A somewhat flexible one can keep functioning as plant communities shift through the year. There is also a pleasing realism in this. The prairie was never a flat green carpet of one species alone. It was mixed, dynamic, and alive with options, and the bison fed within that richer botanical world. In winter, they can uncover buried plants with their heads. When the cold season seals the prairie under snow, many animals become more dependent on chance, stored food, or sheltered browsing. Bison take a more forceful approach. They lower the skull, drive into the drift, and sweep until stems and leaves hidden underneath come back within reach. It is a simple act, but it changes the meaning of winter. Snow is not always an absolute barrier. It is sometimes a layer to be moved. The ability turns the animal into its own answer to scarcity, using bone, muscle, and determination where another grazer might falter. There is something profoundly North American in that image. A dark, massive head against white ground, breath rising, snow pushed aside by strength alone. You can feel the old contest in it between season and survival. Beneath the drift, lies summer stored in plant tissue, and this animal has the build and will to go looking for it. Snow rarely stops a hungry bison for very long. Winter can make a grassland look sealed shut, as if food has vanished under a white lid. Yet for this animal, snow is often a delay rather than a defeat. A drifting storm may cover the prairie for miles, but a determined grazer keeps searching, moving, testing, pushing, and uncovering enough to carry on. That persistence matters because hunger on the plains is never abstract. It is immediate, physical, and tied to weather that can turn hostile in a single afternoon. What makes this so compelling is the mood of the scene. Other creatures may retreat, bunch up, or wait for relief. The bison often continues, trudging through open cold with a purpose that feels almost ancient. You can imagine the breath clouding in front of the muzzle, the snow flying, and the buried stems finally appearing. It is survival by stubborn motion, a reminder that life on the prairie often favors the animal that keeps going. Their dark, dense coats absorb sunlight during bitter cold. In the depth of winter, even weak sunlight can matter. The heavy outer coat does more than block wind and hold warmth close to the body. Its dark color helps capture what little solar energy the season offers, turning pale daylight into a small but useful advantage. That may sound like a subtle detail, yet on open plains, subtle advantages can decide whether an animal merely endures or truly belongs. Imagine standing in a hard winter field where the air bites and the ground radiates cold. A shaggy, dark body facing the sun is not just a picture of endurance. It is an instrument making use of the environment in every possible way. The result is a creature that does not simply tolerate the cold season, but seems built to gather strength from it. Even the color of the coat becomes part of the strategy, as if winter light itself has been drawn into the design. The thickest fur grows over the head, shoulders, and chest. The pattern of the coat reveals where the battle with weather is fiercest. The front of the body faces wind, drifting snow, and every hard edge of a winter storm, so that is where the fur becomes most impressive. It builds into a heavy shield across the head, neck, shoulders, and chest, giving the animal that famous front-loaded appearance. Once you know why it is there, the outline feels less like decoration and more like armor. This is a body dressed according to the direction of hardship. The storm hits first at the front, so the strongest insulation gathers there. That makes the animal look almost as though it has stepped out of two different seasons at once, wrapped thickly in winter ahead and more lightly behind. It is a wonderfully expressive kind of anatomy, You can see climate written across the coat and understand that the prairie sculpted even the distribution of hair. Underneath that heavy coat, bison skin is surprisingly mobile. For such a massive animal, there is a hidden nimbleness just beneath the fur. The skin can twitch and ripple in localized movements, which lets the body react quickly to irritation without committing to full motion. In practical terms, that means biting flies, ticks, and other pests do not always get an easy meal simply because the animal looks slow. A section of hide can shudder, muscles can flick, and insects can be dislodged or disturbed in an instant. It is one of those details that changes your sense of what strength looks like. We tend to imagine power as pushing, charging, or standing firm. But here, power includes a smaller, more precise ability, a living surface that can answer annoyance with its own quick language of movement. It also adds to the wonder of the body itself. Beneath all that thickness is sensitivity, and beneath the apparent stillness is a layer constantly ready to respond. Their tails can flick constantly at biting summer insects. Summer on the prairie is not only green light and warm grass. It is also buzzing pressure from insects that feed on blood, crowd the face, and wear down the patience of large animals. The tail becomes one of the simplest and most persistent defenses. It lashes, swishes, and snaps at the air, striking flanks and hindquarters again and again with a rhythm that may continue for hours. That motion can look casual from a distance, but it is part of daily survival in a season when small attackers arrive in relentless numbers. There is something fascinating in that contrast. An animal powerful enough to face wolves and storms must still spend part of its day answering creatures no bigger than a fingernail. On the plains, discomfort comes at every scale. The tail tells that story beautifully. Behind the grand silhouette and the heavy horns, there is still a body dealing with irritation, one flick at a time. Bison live in groups, but herd structure changes with season. A herd is not a fixed social shape that stays the same all year. It shifts with weather, food, breeding, and the needs of different ages and sexes. That changing structure makes the species more interesting because it means group life is dynamic rather than rigid. At one time of year, the animals you see together may form a calm, practical association built around calves and mothers. Later, as the breeding season rises, the same broad landscape can reorganize into something more tense, noisy, and competitive. The herd becomes not just a gathering, but a moving social calendar written across the prairie. This flexibility also helps explain how such large animals manage open country so effectively. They are not bound to one permanent pattern. They regroup as conditions change. To watch them over time is to see society in motion, expanding, splitting, and reforming in response to the turning year and the demands it brings. Females and calves usually stay together in separate bands. There is a distinct social world centered on mothers and young, and it gives the herd a different emotional character from the one people often imagine. Instead of raw power alone, there is continuity, teaching, caution, and the practical business of keeping vulnerable lives moving through open country. These bands allow calves to remain close to experienced adults while still growing within a group made up largely of animals with similar daily needs. The effect is a kind of nursery society on the prairie, though one without walls and without any softness in the landscape itself. Calves must follow, feed, rest, and respond within a moving group, and the adults around them provide the stability that makes that possible. It is one more reason the species feels so compelling. Beneath the image of shaggy giants lies a social structure with room for care and coordination. The life of the herd is not only force. It is also protection and instruction. Adult bulls often spend much of the year apart. For long stretches outside the breeding season, mature males may live more loosely, alone or in small bachelor groups, rather than remaining woven into the main family-centered bands. That separation changes the tone of their lives. The big bulls can seem like solitary weathered figures on the landscape, carrying great size and presence without the constant social bustle of the mixed herd. There is something striking about that image. An animal so iconic often spends much of its time not in the center of a dramatic crowd, but in relative independence, grazing, resting, and moving on its own terms until the season changes. It gives the species a wider emotional range. The bison is not only the thunder of many bodies together. It is also the quiet power of a single bull, standing in open country, already imposing even in stillness. That seasonal distance sets the stage for the sudden return of competition when breeding time arrives. During the rut, quiet plains can erupt with bellowing males. A landscape that seemed calm can change almost overnight when breeding season begins. The stillness gives way to deep vocalizations rolling across the grass, as bulls advertise strength, announce presence, and confront rivals. The sound matters because it transforms how the prairie feels. What was once an expanse of grazing and wind becomes an arena charged with tension. These bellows are not random noise. They are part warning, part challenge, part declaration that the season of contest has arrived. If you heard it from a distance without context, you might think something larger than the land itself had begun to stir. That is part of the fascination. The rut reveals another side of the species, one in which voice becomes force. Before any clash begins, sound has already reshaped the mood of the world around them. The plains are suddenly no longer quiet country. They are a place of presence, pressure, and competition carried on the air. Bulls sometimes clash head-to-head with astonishing force. When two mature males decide to test one another physically, the result can be as dramatic as anything on the plains. They face off, posture, size each other up, and then drive together with the weight and momentum of powerful bodies behind heavily built skulls. It is not only a contest of courage. It is a collision shaped by anatomy, timing, and the willingness to keep pressing. The sight must be unforgettable at close range, the impact traveling through the ground as much as through the bodies. Yet what makes it even more fascinating is that these clashes emerge from a much larger seasonal logic. They are not meaningless violence. They are moments in the struggle to secure breeding access, social position, and temporary dominance. That gives them a raw narrative force. On one level, it is two animals meeting in sheer physical contest. On another, it is the breeding season reducing life to impact, endurance, and will. Much of rutting season is display, scent, and stamina. The breeding season is not simply a series of dramatic collisions. Much of it unfolds through slower, subtler forms of pressure that can be just as important. Bulls size one another up, posture, move with deliberate confidence, wallow, scent the ground and their own bodies, and shadow females while rivals watch closely. In that world, presence matters. Endurance matters. The ability to hold position for long periods can matter just as much as outright aggression. This makes the rut feel almost theatrical, though the stakes are entirely real. Each action carries information. A look, a smell, a way of walking, or the refusal to yield can all shape what happens next. That complexity makes the season more compelling than a simple battle story. It is a contest fought partly through atmosphere, not just impact. The plains become filled with signals that other bison can read, even when a human observer only senses that the air has changed. A dominant bull may guard one female for hours. Once a male secures access to a receptive female, the task is not finished. He may remain close, shadowing her movements and working to keep rivals from slipping in. This guarding behavior can stretch on for long periods, turning a pair of animals into the center of a tense little drama within the larger herd. Every step becomes significant. Rivals approach. The guarding bull responds. The female moves. The pattern continues. There is something unexpectedly intimate about it, even within the rough energy of the rut. Beneath the noise and competition, there is sustained attention focused on one individual and one moment in the breeding cycle. That gives the scene a different kind of intensity. It is not only about victory in the abstract. It is about holding a position minute by minute while other males weigh their chances. The plains, which from afar can seem vast and impersonal, suddenly narrow into one guarded relationship played out in real time. Bison communicate with grunts, snorts, bellows, and body posture. Their world is not silent, and it is not built on sound alone. Communication moves through voice, breath, stance, head position, and the way a body is held in relation to others. A grunt can help maintain contact. A snort can warn or signal agitation. A bellow can announce breeding season tension across a distance. Meanwhile, posture can say as much as any call, whether in threat, caution, attention, or calm movement within the herd. That layered communication makes the species feel more socially alive. A bison is not merely reacting to the landscape. It is also constantly reading and broadcasting information to other bison. Once you start to imagine that ongoing exchange, the herd becomes far more than a cluster of large animals grazing together. It becomes a network of signals, some loud, some subtle, all shaping the flow of collective life. The prairie conversation is happening all the time, even when human ears only catch fragments. Calves can recognize and follow their mothers in busy herds. That ability may sound simple until you picture the conditions. A herd can be crowded, noisy, and full of bodies similar in color, shape, and movement. For a young calf, losing track of the right adult would be more than confusing. It could be dangerous. So recognition has to develop quickly and function reliably amid motion and distraction. The calf learns the look, smell, call, and movement pattern of its mother, then uses those cues to stay oriented as the group shifts around it. There is something deeply compelling in that. In a landscape of wind and distance, one of the first great tasks of life is learning exactly who to follow. It turns the herd into more than a mass. Within all that scale, there are specific bonds, and a calf's survival depends on reading them correctly. The giant social world of bison begins, for the young, with one recognizable individual in the crowd. Mothers defend calves fiercely when danger comes too close. The prairie can look calm until a threat appears, and then the mood changes instantly. A mother with a young calf nearby is not a passive presence waiting to see what happens. She can become intensely protective, positioning herself, confronting danger, and responding with a force that makes clear just how high the stakes are. This protective drive gives the species one of its most gripping emotional dimensions. The same animal that may seem steady and reserved while grazing can, in a heartbeat, become focused and uncompromising when the vulnerable life beside her is at risk. That transformation is part of what makes herd life so powerful to watch. It reveals that survival is not only about size or endurance. It is also about attachment. A calf is not just another small animal in the grass. It is defended value, and the mother's response can turn open country into a boundary no threat should cross lightly. Wolves can hunt bison, but it takes skill and timing. This is not a simple predator and prey story, where speed alone decides the outcome. Wolves face an animal that is enormous, social, and capable of fighting back with dangerous force. So, success depends on reading conditions carefully. The pack must judge weakness, weather, footing, spacing, and the behavior of the herd, then commit only when the situation offers a real chance. That makes the hunt feel more like strategy than straightforward pursuit. It is a contest between coordination and mass, between group tactics and the hard reality of facing prey that can injure or kill its attackers. The fascination lies in that balance. The wolf pack is among the continent's most intelligent hunting teams, yet even it must approach with caution. A bison is not an easy meal waiting to happen. It is a problem to be solved, and often a problem that resists solution with astonishing strength. Healthy adult bison are difficult and dangerous predators' prey. There is a reason predators do not casually rush a strong, mature individual. A full-grown animal brings enormous size, powerful movement, sharp horns, and the support of nearby herd members if the situation develops that way. For a predator, attacking such prey is not merely challenging. It can be a serious gamble with injury as the likely cost of the mistake. That changes the psychology of the encounter. Instead of seeing the bison as a target, it makes more sense to see it as a formidable obstacle that may be beyond the worth of the attempt. This helps explain why predators often look for other openings, especially when stronger or more vulnerable options appear. It also increases the respect the animal commands on the landscape. Even top hunters must think carefully in its presence. The bison is not only a grazer within the food web. It is one of the species that pushes back hardest against being reduced to food. Deep snow can shift the balance between wolves and bison. Weather does not merely sit in the background of prairie life. Sometimes it steps forward and changes the terms of survival for everyone involved. Deep snow is one of those moments. It can hinder movement, separate individuals, drain strength, and make it harder for large bodies to maintain the same freedom they enjoy on firmer ground. Under those conditions, wolves may find opportunities that would not exist in easier weather. The hunt becomes less about pure courage and more about using the season itself as an ally. That is what makes winter so compelling in predator and prey stories. The land enters the contest. Snow becomes a participant. It slows one side, sharpens the chances of the other, and turns ordinary movement into a costly effort. For the bison, strength is still there, but it is working against a thicker resistance. For wolves, the storm may open a narrow window that the pack has been waiting for. Bears sometimes target young calves during vulnerable spring weeks. Spring feels hopeful to us, full of fresh grass and new life. But in the wild, it also creates a brief season of danger, centered on the very youngest animals. Newly born calves are small, still developing strength and awareness, and far more vulnerable than the adults around them. In some places, bears may take advantage of that narrow window, especially when opportunity and timing align. This does not define the whole relationship between bears and bison, but it does add another layer to the story of early life on the plains and in northern range country. A calf enters a world that welcomes it with milk, movement, and herd protection. Yet it also enters a world where spring predators are watching for moments of weakness. That contrast is part of what gives birth season its emotional force. Renewal arrives hand in hand with risk, and survival in those first weeks is never something to take for granted. Humans have always been the most powerful force in bison history. Predators, storms, and hard winters shaped the species, but no influence has matched the scale of human impact. People hunted bison for thousands of years, depended on them, honored them, followed them, and built lifeways around their movements. Later, Humans also drove the catastrophic slaughter that nearly erased them from the continent. That enormous range of influence makes our relationship with this animal unlike any other in its story. We have been provider, hunter, partner, destroyer, rescuer, manager, and would-be restorer. The fate of the species has repeatedly turned on what people chose to do. That truth gives the bison a weight beyond biology alone. Its history is also a mirror held up to human history, showing what reverence can create, what greed can ruin, and what effort can still begin to repair. To follow the story of bison is, in part, to follow the changing moral choices of our own species. For many indigenous nations, bison were food, shelter, tools, and kin. To reduce this relationship to mere usefulness would miss its depth completely. Across much of North America, many indigenous nations lived in long and intimate relationship with these animals, relying on them for nourishment, warmth, mobility, craft, and continuity across generations. Meat fed families through hard seasons. Hides became robes, bedding, lodge covers, and protection from cold. Bones, sinew, horn, and hide became tools and materials shaped by skill and care. Yet beyond all that, there was also respect, reciprocity, and meaning. In many traditions, the animal was not simply taken from the land as a resource. It was part of a moral and spiritual world in which gratitude, ceremony, and responsibility mattered deeply. That changes the emotional scale of the story. This was never just about survival in a practical sense. It was also about relationship, identity, and a way of living with a being powerful enough to sustain whole societies. Nearly every part of a bison could be used. What makes that fact so remarkable is not only the range of uses, but the mindset behind it. When a hunt succeeded, the animal did not become a single product. It became many. Meat could be eaten fresh or preserved. Hides could become clothing, blankets, moccasins, shields, or lodge covers. Sinew served as strong cord and thread. Bones could be shaped into tools. Horns became containers and utensils. Even hooves, hair, and stomach parts could find use in daily life. This was an economy of profound attentiveness, where a value was recognized throughout the whole body rather than concentrated in one prized portion. That kind of knowledge does not come from casual contact. It comes from generations learning how to live well with an animal that mattered at every level. There is something deeply humbling in that. A single life taken from the prairie could continue outward into shelter, work, craft, and family life long after the hunt itself had ended. Bison hunts once demanded extraordinary cooperation, planning, and knowledge. A successful hunt was never just a matter of charging after a herd and hoping for luck. It required careful reading of terrain, animal movement, weather, wind, season, and human coordination. People needed to know how the herd might respond, where it might funnel, when to approach, when to stay hidden, and how to act together under pressure. That meant scouting, decision-making, communication, and a shared trust that could not be improvised in the moment. The hunt was a test of collective intelligence as much as courage. It also carried enormous stakes. A good outcome could sustain a community. A mistake could waste effort, risk injury, or scatter animals beyond reach. Seen that way, a hunt becomes something far greater than a chase. It becomes a major social undertaking, shaped by memory and skill, where knowledge of the land and knowledge of the animal had to work together if people were to succeed on the open plains. Some ancient bison jumps were used for thousands of years. There are places on the landscape where archaeology reveals just how deep this relationship runs. At certain cliffs and natural traps, people developed methods for driving herds toward a drop, where animals would fall and could then be processed by waiting hunters below. These sites were not used once and forgotten. Some show repeated use across astonishing spans of time, with layer upon layer of bone and human activity building up over centuries and even millennia. That tells us something extraordinary. Certain locations became embedded in cultural memory, passed down as proven places where knowledge of terrain and herd behavior could be turned into reliable success. Imagine the continuity contained in that. Generations returning to the same landform, learning the same winds, reading the same approaches, and adding their own chapter to a practice already ancient. A bison jump is more than a hunting site. It is a long-lived meeting point between landscape, memory, and collective skill. Entire cultures rose around the seasonal movements of bison herds. When an animal moves in great numbers across a region, it can become more than prey. It can become a calendar, a map, and a foundation for how people arrange their year. Seasonal movement shaped when communities gathered, when they traveled, where they camped, and how they prepared for what came next. The herd's changing location affected food supply, labor, trade, and the rhythm of family and social life. That meant the animal's movement was woven into culture at a very deep level. It helped organize practical decisions, but also memory, expectation, and the meaning of seasons themselves. There is something powerful in realizing that whole ways of life were tuned to the pulse of these migrations. The herd did not simply pass through the landscape. It helped structure human life across it. In that sense, bison moved through time as well as space, drawing communities into a recurring pattern that returned year after year. Bison shaped trade routes, ceremonies, stories, and survival itself. Their influence spread far beyond the hunt. Because these animals provided so many essential materials, they also shaped exchange between communities. Hides, meat, tools, crafted goods, and knowledge connected regions through trade networks that carried both practical value and cultural meaning. Ceremonies honored the relationship, expressed gratitude, and affirmed responsibilities that came with dependence on such a powerful being. Stories carried lessons, identity, and memory, reminding people that the animal belonged not only to the body, but to the moral imagination of a people. This wider influence makes the bison story feel enormous, because it shows how one species can reach into nearly every level of human life. Economics, spirituality, kinship, and endurance all touched it. The animal helped people live, but it also helped shape how they understood living. In that way, its presence was not limited to the plains outside camp. It extended into language, custom, and the deepest structures of daily existence. The arrival of horses transformed how many plains peoples hunted bison. Once horses spread across the plains, they changed the scale, speed, and possibilities of life in ways that are hard to overstate. Hunting on foot had already required skill and coordination, but mounted hunting introduced a new level of mobility and direct engagement with the herd. Riders could move faster, cover greater distances, track shifting animals more effectively, and operate with a power that transformed the hunt itself. This did not erase earlier knowledge. It built upon it. The old understanding of bison behavior, terrain, and timing remained essential. But now it could be expressed through a new partnership between human and horse. That partnership reshaped more than food gathering. It influenced warfare, travel, trade, and social status across much of the plains. The arrival of the horse, therefore, changed the bison story from within, turning the hunt into something more mobile, more dangerous, and in many cases, more spectacular than it had ever been before. Railways later made the slaughter of bison brutally efficient. The railroad changed the geography of killing. Once tracks cut through bison country, hunters gained easier access to herds, Markets gained easier access to hides and other products, and mass slaughter could happen at a pace that older systems of movement had never allowed. Trains carried people into the herds and carried the stripped value back out again. They also made the destruction visible in a chilling new way, with stories of passengers shooting from train windows and carcasses left behind on the plains. What had once been a continent-scale animal movement now collided with industrial-scale extraction. That is the point where the story becomes especially painful. A species shaped by open land and long time was suddenly forced into the logic of speed, transport, and commerce. The railroad did not act alone, but it amplified everything. It made it easier to reach the animals, easier to remove profit, and easier to leave devastation stretching mile after mile. Commercial hide hunting helped collapse the great herds with shocking speed. When hides became a major commodity, the animal's body was reduced in the eyes of many hunters to one valuable layer. Herds were shot in staggering numbers, skinned and left on the ground, with meat and much else often wasted. This was not subsistence. It was market-driven destruction, and the scale of it can still feel almost unbelievable. In a period that was brief compared with the long history of the species, abundance was turned into scarcity by relentless profit-seeking. That speed is one of the most haunting parts of the story. What had looked inexhaustible to many observers was not inexhaustible at all. Even tens of millions could be brought down when technology, transport, commerce, and policy all aligned against them. The collapse also carried human consequences far beyond the animal itself, striking at indigenous nations whose lives and economies had long been bound to the herds. The loss spread outward through entire worlds. By the late 19th century, only tiny remnants remained. This is the moment when the story seems almost impossible to believe. An animal that had once filled the plains in breathtaking abundance had been reduced to scattered survivors, a few wild groups and a few captive or semi-protected herds hanging on at the edge of disappearance. The contrast between what had been and what remained was so vast that it must have felt like witnessing the removal of part of the continent itself. People who had known the old herds lived long enough to see that near absence, which makes the tragedy feel even sharper. This was not an ancient loss buried in deep time. It happened within living memory. The plains did not slowly forget the bison. They were stripped of them with alarming speed. By then, survival depended on chance, on a few human decisions in favor of protection, and on the stubborn resilience of the last animals left standing in a world that had turned against them. A few private ranchers helped keep bison from vanishing entirely. It is one of the stranger turns in the bison story that some of the last refuge came not only from public concern, but from individuals who gathered surviving animals into private herds. These ranchers were not all motivated by the same reasons. Some acted from curiosity, some from business interest, some from a growing recognition that the species was disappearing before their eyes. Whatever the motive, the result mattered. At a time when the wild herds had been shattered, private holdings preserved living animals that otherwise might have been lost. This does not erase the complexity of ranching history, nor does it solve the larger moral wounds of the collapse, but it does show how narrow the margin of survival had become. The species endured partly because a small number of people decided not to let the last animals go. In that sense, rescue began not with triumph, but with fragments gathered during an emergency. Yellowstone became one of the last great refuges for wild bison. As the herds vanished across much of the continent, Yellowstone remained one of the few places where a truly wild remnant survived on its own ground. That fact gives the park a weight beyond scenery or tourism. It became a holdout, a living reservoir of continuity in a period when continuity was nearly broken. Imagine the importance of that. While so much of the species passed into memory, this landscape still held animals moving through mountains, valleys, and plateaus without having been fully domesticated or remade into livestock. That survival gave later conservation efforts something priceless, a population still tied to wild behavior and place. It also turned Yellowstone into a symbol, though not an easy one. The park would later become the center of intense conflict over how these animals should be managed. Even so, its role as refuge remains extraordinary. It sheltered a fragment of the old world long enough for hope to remain possible. Saving bison required ranchers, conservationists, governments, and indigenous leadership. No single group rescued this species alone. The recovery story is more complicated and more interesting because it depends on very different actors working at different times, often with different motives and not always in harmony. Private herd keepers preserved animals. Conservationists pushed for protection. Governments established refuges, parks, and breeding programs. Indigenous nations, whose relationship with the species long predated all of this, remained central to its cultural meaning and have become central again in restoration efforts across many regions. That layered history matters because it prevents the rescue from becoming a simple heroic tale. Bison survived through a patchwork of decisions, institutions, and commitments that gradually widened the space for their return. It also shows that recovery is not merely biological. It is social and political, shaped by who has land, who has authority, and who insists that the animal's future still matters. The rescue, in other words, had to become collective. Today's recovery is real, but truly wild herds remain rare. At first glance, the species can seem like a complete conservation success. There are bison in parks, preserves, ranches, and restoration projects across North America, and their numbers are far better than they were at the edge of extinction. Yet that surface recovery hides an important distinction. Many animals live in fenced settings, in commercial herds, or under management conditions that limit how freely they can move and behave. Truly wild, conservation-important populations with room to function across large landscapes remain uncommon. That makes the recovery story both encouraging and unfinished at the same time. The species has survived, which is no small miracle. But survival alone is not the same as restoration to something resembling the old ecological role. The deeper question is not simply whether bison exist. It is whether they can once again live with enough space, genetic integrity, and freedom to act like the great roaming animals they once were across a continent. Many living bison descend from a surprisingly small number. Near extinction leaves a biological echo. When only a limited number of animals survive a collapse, the future population carries the legacy of that narrow survival. In the case of bison, many of the animals alive today trace their ancestry back to a relatively small pool of survivors from the late 19th and early 20th centuries. That means the modern species, despite its large symbolic presence, passed through a very tight historical bottleneck. The idea is almost eerie. Millions reduced to so few, and from those few, the living population slowly spread again. It gives every herd a sense of fragility beneath the strength. These animals may look ancient and indomitable, but their recent history hangs close behind them. The wide chest, the hump, the horns, all of it came through a perilously narrow gate. Recovery did happen, but it happened from a number so small that the genetic consequences still shape conservation decisions today. That genetic bottleneck still matters for modern conservation planning. Once a species passes through a severe population crash, numbers alone no longer tell the whole story. Conservationists also have to think about genetic diversity because a reduced gene pool can affect resilience, health, reproduction, and long-term adaptability. In practical terms, this means bison recovery is not simply a matter of adding more animals to more places. It involves deciding which herds should contribute to future breeding, how isolated populations can be managed, and how to avoid narrowing diversity even further. The challenge is subtle, but important. A species can appear recovered in headcount while still carrying hidden vulnerabilities from its past. That is part of what makes bison restoration so fascinating. It is not a straightforward rewind to an earlier world. It is a careful effort to rebuild from damaged inheritance, using science and planning to protect possibilities the old slaughter nearly destroyed. The past is still present inside the genes. Some bison carry cattle genes from past hybrid breeding. In the years after the Great Crash, some herd owners crossed bison with cattle, hoping to produce animals that combined hardiness with domestic traits. Those experiments never created the livestock revolution some people imagined, but they did leave a lasting biological mark. In certain herds, traces of cattle ancestry remain, passed down through generations even after the hybrid projects themselves faded. That makes the conservation story more complicated. Not every animal that looks like a bison carries only bison ancestry, and for managers trying to protect the species as a distinct wild lineage, that matters deeply. It adds an unexpected twist to the idea of rescue. Survival alone was not always clean. Some of the animals that helped carry the species forward also carried the imprint of human attempts to reshape it. The result is a modern population where ancestry must often be examined carefully because appearance by itself cannot reveal the full genetic story. Conservation herds are often tested to protect bison ancestry. Modern restoration depends not just on fences, land, and breeding numbers, but on genetics. Managers use testing to understand which herds remain closest to unhybridized ancestry and which animals may carry cattle introgression from earlier mixing. This matters because once a restoration herd is established, its genetic legacy can spread into future projects for decades. Choosing the right founders therefore becomes a serious responsibility. The work may sound technical, yet it is tied to a very human question. What exactly are we trying to save when we say we want to save bison? Testing helps answer that, allowing conservation programs to protect lineages that preserve as much of the species' original heritage as possible. It is one more sign that recovery has entered a new phase. The emergency rescue of mere survival has become a more careful effort to defend identity, making sure that the animal returned to the land is not only numerous, but as fully itself as possible. Wood bison recovery brought animals back to parts of Canada. For a time, the northern form faced losses and complications severe enough that its future looked deeply uncertain. Yet recovery efforts in Canada gradually made possible the return of animals to parts of their former range, allowing wood bison once again to inhabit landscapes where they had been diminished or gone. That return carries special force because it restores not just a species, but a regional presence that feels distinctly tied to the north. These are not merely transplanted symbols placed for display. In successful cases, they become once again part of the living ecology of boreal meadows, wetlands, and river systems. The achievement is therefore both biological and geographical. It gives the north back one of its great native herbivores. It also reminds us that restoration can happen at large scales when people commit to the long work. What was nearly lost can, with care and persistence, begin to occupy its old country again. Disease management still shapes where some bison can roam. Even after survival and partial recovery, freedom on the landscape is often limited by concerns about disease transmission, especially where bison ranges overlap with cattle country. Management decisions about movement, boundaries, and tolerance are shaped not only by habitat and politics, but by fears about what animals may carry and where those risks are considered acceptable. This gives the modern story a different kind of tension. The great question is no longer only whether bison can live. It is where they are allowed to live and under what conditions. That means the future of the species can hinge on veterinary policy as much as on ecology. It also shows how hard true restoration can be in a continent now crowded with livestock systems, fences, and competing interests. The old world of broad migration has given way to one in which disease concerns can determine the edges of possibility, narrowing the map of where wild movement is still allowed. Brucellosis has made bison politics tense in parts of the West. Sometimes the greatest barrier facing a wild animal is not weather or predators, but human disagreement. In parts of the American West, brucellosis has turned bison into the center of a long and bitter argument involving ranchers, wildlife managers, tribal nations, conservationists, and state agencies. The disease can affect cattle, so even the possibility of transmission has made people fiercely protective of boundaries and deeply wary of wandering herds. That means an animal stepping beyond an invisible management line can trigger legal battles, removals, quarantine plans, and public anger. It is a strikingly modern kind of drama. The old conflict was over whether bison would survive at all. The new conflict is often over whether they will be allowed to move as wild animals naturally move. In that sense, the controversy reveals something profound. Saving a species is one challenge. Deciding how much wildness people are willing to tolerate is another. Fences remain one of the biggest obstacles to free migration. A fence can look so ordinary to us that we barely register it. For bison, it can be the line between a functioning wildlife and a managed existence cut into pieces. These animals evolved in a world of immense movement, where herds could respond to weather, forage, water, and season by shifting across huge distances. Put fences into that story, and the rhythm changes immediately. Routes narrow. Choices shrink. Pressure builds in places where animals once would have spread out or moved on. This is what makes fencing such a powerful symbol in bison history. It does more than block a path. It replaces a continent-sized pattern with a restricted one. The body of the animal still carries the memory of roaming. The landscape, in many places, no longer permits it. A fence, therefore, becomes more than a barrier of wire. It becomes a hard edge between the old ecology and the modern one. Bison need space, and truly wild space is hard to find. The challenge is not only keeping the species alive, it is finding landscapes large enough for it to live in a way that still resembles its old ecological role. A bison can survive in a pasture, behind a fence, or inside a bounded reserve. But survival at that scale is different from belonging to a vast working ecosystem. Truly wild space means room to move, room to respond to drought and winter, room for herds to spread, regroup, and alter the land over time. That kind of space has become rare on a continent now divided by roads, ranches, towns, political borders, and competing land uses. This makes the animal strangely out of scale with the modern world. Its body and behavior were built for openness, but openness itself is now among the scarcest resources it requires. The bison therefore survives not only as a biological species, but as a test of whether people can still make room for largeness. Reintroducing bison can restore ecological rhythms lost for generations. When bison return to a landscape after a long absence, the change is not always immediate to human eyes, but it begins almost at once. Grazing patterns shift. Trails start to appear. Wallows form. Nutrients move in new ways. Some plants are cropped hard, while others are left to rise taller. Over time, the prairie begins to recover a pulse it once knew well. That is why reintroduction can feel so moving. It is not merely the return of a famous animal. It is the return of process, disturbance, and variation that many grasslands evolved with and then lost. A prairie without bison can still be beautiful. A prairie with them becomes more dynamic, less uniform, and often more alive in its patterns. There is something almost musical in that restoration. The instrument was there all along, waiting. What returns with the animals is the missing rhythm, and the land begins once more to play the kind of song it was built to hold. Bison grazing creates a shifting patchwork across the prairie. They do not move across grasslands like lawnmowers making everything equal. Instead, they crop some places intensely, revisit certain patches, ignore others for a time, and leave behind a landscape of difference. One area may be clipped short and sunlit. Another may remain taller, denser, and more sheltered. That constant uneven use creates a patchwork that changes through the season and across the years. It is one of the reasons bison matter so much ecologically. Uniformity may look tidy to people, but prairies often thrive on variation. A shifting mosaic of short and tall growth creates more kinds of opportunity than a single blanket height ever could. Once you picture that, the grazer becomes something larger than a consumer of grass. It becomes a sculptor of complexity. Every mouthful contributes to a broader pattern, and that pattern can ripple outward through insects, birds, soil conditions, and the visual character of the land itself. That patchwork helps many different plants thrive side by side. A prairie becomes richer when not every plant is asked to live under the same conditions. Some species do well where grazing keeps light reaching the soil and reduces competition from taller neighbors. Others flourish in spots left relatively untouched, where stems can rise high and seed heads can develop fully. Because bison create this variability across the landscape, they help open space for a wider mix of plants to persist together. In effect, they prevent the grassland from becoming too simple. This is one of the hidden beauties of disturbance in nature. What looks like rough treatment at one scale can produce diversity at another. The animals are not trying to garden, yet their feeding helps create the very differences that allow more species to coexist. A prairie shaped this way becomes less like a flat field and more like a living tapestry, with zones of pressure and release woven side by side. The result is complexity born from movement and appetite. Some birds prefer the shorter grass that bison leave behind. To a bird searching for nesting or feeding conditions, a prairie is not one habitat, but many. Areas that have been grazed short can offer open visibility, easier movement, and access to insects or seeds that might be harder to find in dense cover. For certain species, those closely cropped patches are not damage at all. They are opportunity. This is what makes bison so fascinating as ecological partners. By simply feeding according to their own needs, they produce microhabitats that other creatures can select from with surprising precision. A short grass patch may look plain to us, but to a bird, it can be exactly the right place to forage, display, or keep watch for danger. The result is a grassland with more usable options. Different birds can choose different structural conditions across the same broad prairie. The large grazer therefore helps shape avian life, not through intention, but through the texture it leaves behind on the ground. Other species benefit from taller grass in areas bison skip. What the animals leave alone can matter just as much as what they crop. In places that are grazed lightly or temporarily avoided, grasses and flowering plants can grow taller, creating shelter, nesting cover, cooler shaded spaces, and different foraging conditions. That means a bison-shaped prairie is valuable not only because of the short grazed zones, but because of the contrast between those zones and the taller ones nearby. Some creatures need concealment. Some need stems for nesting. Some need the humidity and protective structure of denser vegetation. Those needs are met when a landscape remains variable. This is the elegance of the system. The animals do not have to care for each species individually. By feeding unevenly, they create a world in which many kinds of life can find their preferred corner. The skipped patch, waving high in the wind, is therefore not an accident or a missed opportunity. It is part of the richness. Their dung feeds insects that support birds and small mammals. One of the least glamorous parts of the bison story turns out to be one of the most important. Dung is not waste in the prairie. It is food, moisture, chemistry, and habitat delivered directly onto the ground. Beetles and many other invertebrates depend on it, using it for feeding, breeding, and shelter. Those insects then become food for birds, small mammals, and other creatures higher in the web of life. In this way, the output of a giant grazer ripples outward through the ecosystem, sustaining life far smaller and easier to miss. It is a wonderful reminder that ecological greatness is not only about dramatic size or visible power. Sometimes it lies in the ordinary deposit left behind after a grazing animal passes. What seems crude from a human viewpoint is actually a transfer of energy that keeps countless smaller lives going. Even the droppings of bison help stitch the prairie together, linking grass to insects to song and movement. Even their trails can guide water and alter plant growth. When many heavy bodies follow similar routes again and again, the ground begins to remember them. Bison trails compress into the soil, create lines of repeated disturbance, and subtly influence how water moves across a slope or plain after rain. A slight depression may channel runoff. A compacted path may change where moisture lingers or where seeds gain a foothold. Over time, those effects can influence which plants grew best along the route and which struggle. This is one of the most fascinating ways large animals shape land. They do not need to dig deep or build dams to matter. Repetition alone can become a kind of low-level engineering. The trail turns movement into structure. It becomes part of the prairie's physical pattern, carrying not just hooves, but consequences. You can picture an old path winding through grass like a memory made visible, and know that the land itself has been quietly redirected by countless passing animals. Bison do not graze evenly, and that unevenness is powerful. If they fed with perfect regularity, the prairie would become simpler. Instead, they are selective in ways that create imbalance, and that imbalance turns out to be one of their greatest ecological gifts. Certain areas are favored. Certain plants are hit harder. Some zones recover, while others remain under repeated use. At first, unevenness can sound like disorder, but in grasslands, disorder of this kind often generates vitality. It prevents sameness from taking over. Different growth stages appear side by side. Different insects and birds find room. The land becomes structured by preference rather than flattened into uniform use. This is powerful because it reveals an unexpected truth. Healthy ecosystems are not always balanced in the neat way people imagine. Sometimes they depend on partiality, revisiting, and the rough patterning left by a large animal following its own instincts. The prairie grows more complex not despite that uneven use, but because of it. Prairie fires and bison together once shaped vast living mosaics. To understand the old grasslands, you have to imagine two great forces working together. Fire swept through in seasons when conditions allowed, clearing dead growth, releasing nutrients, and resetting parts of the prairie. Then bison responded, often moving into those renewed places and grazing the fresh regrowth with special intensity. The result was a constantly shifting mosaic of recently burned, heavily grazed, lightly used, and recovering areas spread across immense distances. This interplay gave the prairie its dynamism. Fire alone would not have created the same pattern. Grazing alone would not have created it either. Together, they generated a landscape alive with variation in height, density, species mix, and structure. That is why the old plains were not just huge, but intricate. They were being rewritten again and again by flame and hoof. When you picture that collaboration, the grassland stops looking empty. It becomes one of the great living pattern-making systems on Earth. Fresh burns often attract bison to the newest green growth. After a fire passes, the blackened ground can look stark to us, almost ruined. Then the first new shoots rise, bright and tender against the ash, and for bison that fresh growth can be irresistible. Recently burned patches often produce highly palatable forage, and the animals may seek them out with surprising focus. There is something almost magical in that response. A place marked by fire becomes a magnet for life within a short time. The grazer arrives not despite the burn, but because of what the burn has made possible. This reveals a deep relationship between disturbance and renewal. Fire opens the stage, and bison step into it. Their feeding then shapes the next chapter of regrowth, creating a sequence of change that continues long after the flames are gone. The black earth, the first green blades, the heavy bodies arriving to graze, all of it forms a story of recovery written at remarkable speed. Their grazing can help keep grasslands from turning into shrubland. Without enough disturbance, some prairies begin to shift. Woody plants gain ground, shrubs spread, and the open character of the grassland slowly starts to change. Bison can help resist that transition by repeatedly feeding in ways that favor grasses and maintain more open conditions. They do not solve every problem everywhere, but they can be an important force helping grasslands remain grasslands rather than drifting toward a more shrubby state. That makes them guardians of openness in a very real sense. Their influence helps preserve the broad sightlines, sunlight, and plant communities that define many prairie ecosystems. It also reminds us that grasslands are not passive spaces waiting to remain the same forever. They often require active ecological forces to hold their form. In the ancient system, bison were one of those forces. Their feeding helped defend the identity of the prairie itself, keeping the horizon wide and the grassy world in motion. Bison are ecosystem engineers disguised as massive grazers. At first glance, they seem simple enough to classify. They eat grass, move in herds, and dominate the view with their size. But once you follow their effects through a landscape, the label of grazer starts to feel too small. They alter vegetation patterns, create trails, disturb soil, form wallows, redistribute nutrients, support insect life, influence bird habitat, and interact with fire in ways that reshape the whole prairie. In other words, they help build the conditions under which many other species live. That is what an ecosystem engineer does. The beauty of the bison is that it performs this role without seeming mechanical or abstract. It does it by living its ordinary life. Every step, bite, rest, and roll contributes to larger outcomes. The disguise is that of a shaggy herbivore. The reality is a landscape-shaping force. Once you realize that, it becomes almost impossible to see a bison as merely an animal among others. Ancient relatives of bison once roamed with mammoths and saber-toothed cats. The modern animal carries deep time behind it. If you travel far enough into the Ice Age past, you enter a world where the ancestors and relatives of today's bison shared the landscape with creatures that now sound almost mythical. Mammoths crossed cold grasslands. Saber-toothed cats hunted among large herbivores. Giant predators and massive prey lived together in ecosystems unlike anything left in North America today. In that company, bison lineage was already present, already part of the great drama of Pleistocene life. This makes the species feel much older than its familiar modern image suggests. The animal standing in a park meadow today is tied by ancestry to a world of ice, megafauna, and vanished abundance. There is something thrilling in that continuity. It means bison are not only survivors of 19th century slaughter, they are also survivors from a much longer story, reaching back into a prehistoric continent crowded with giants. The steppe bison crossed into North America during the Ice Age. During colder periods, lowered sea levels exposed a land bridge between Asia and North America, allowing animals to move between the continents in a way that now feels almost unbelievable. Among those travelers was the steppe bison, a hardy Ice Age form that spread into North America and became part of the ancestry of later bison on the continent. That journey gives the species a grand migratory origin. It was not born in isolation within a single region. It arrived through one of the great faunal movements of prehistory, crossing a world where glaciers, open steppe, and vast cold landscapes shaped life at a continental scale. When you picture that crossing, the animal's story suddenly expands. The bison is not merely a creature of the American plains. It is also a traveler from an Ice Age corridor that once connected worlds. Hidden behind the familiar silhouette is an ancient immigrant that walked into a new continent on foot. Prehistoric bison were painted on cave walls by ancient artists. Long before writing, long before modern science gave the animal a name, human beings were already looking at bison with enough fascination to paint them on cave walls. In parts of Europe, Ice Age artists left powerful images of bison deep inside caves, using mineral pigments and the contours of stone to capture mass, movement, and living presence. That fact is astonishing because it means the animal has occupied human imagination for tens of thousands of years. It was not merely hunted. It was observed, remembered, and represented with care. The paintings show that ancient people knew the power of the bison body, its curve, its shoulders, its energy. Across all that time, something about the animal compelled depiction. That creates a moving connection between then and now. When we feel awe at a bison today, we are sharing a response with people so distant in time that their voices are gone, but their images remain. Some fossil bison were even larger than living bison. The bison of today can already seem enormous, yet the fossil record tells us that some of their ancient relatives pushed size even further. Certain prehistoric forms had greater body mass and, in some cases, astonishingly wide horn spans that made them even more imposing than the animals we know now. The effect of that realization is almost dizzying. If modern bison already dominate the imagination, what must it have been like to stand in a world where still larger versions existed? Fossils let us glimpse that lost scale. Bones emerge from sediments, and suddenly the familiar animal expands beyond modern limits. This matters because it reminds us that evolution is not a straight path toward the present form as an obvious final answer. The bison lineage experimented with size and proportions across changing climates and habitats. What survives today is impressive, but it is only one chapter in a longer story that once included giants greater still. Horn shape changed over time as bison species evolved. Horns are not just weapons or ornaments. Over long stretches of evolution, they become records of changing lives. In the bison lineage, horn size and shape shifted as species adapted to different climates, habitats, and selective pressures. Some prehistoric forms carried spectacular, wide-spreading horns, while later ones developed proportions closer to what we recognize in living bison today. Those changes suggest that what worked in one environment or IRA did not necessarily work in another. Climate shifted. Predators shifted. Social dynamics may have shifted too. The horns changed with them. This is one of the pleasures of looking at fossils closely. A skull is not only a remnant, it is a clue to old worlds and old challenges. By comparing horn shapes across time, we can watch evolution adjusting the bison body step by step. The living animal therefore carries not an original design, but a refined version shaped by countless earlier experiments in survival. Modern American bison are the survivors of a deeper story. When most people picture this animal, they see a symbol of the plains, the frontier, or the American West. But that living image sits on top of a much older history. The animal standing in a modern park or prairie preserve is the latest survivor in a lineage shaped by ice ages, shifting grasslands, human relationships, near extinction, and recovery. It is a descendant of ancient forms that lived in worlds crowded with other giants. And it is also a descendant of the small remnant that survived the slaughter of the 19th century. That is why the species feels so resonant. It carries two kinds of survival at once. One is evolutionary, measured across deep time. The other is historical, measured across a few brutal generations. When you look at a bison, you are not just looking at a present-day grazer. You are looking at a creature that has already come through more than one ending and remained on the land. European bison are relatives, but they are not the same species. It is easy to imagine that a bison is simply a bison wherever it appears, but the story is more interesting than that. The great shaggy grazer of North America has a close relative in Europe, often called the Bison. Yet the two are distinct species with different evolutionary histories, different body shapes, and different cabala. Ecological backgrounds. The European animal tends to be a bit taller and less front-heavy in appearance, with a silhouette that feels subtly different once you learn to see it. That distinction matters because it reminds us that bison-like animals evolved in more than one part of the world and followed different paths through time. The North American form is not just a regional copy of a European beast. It is its own branch, shaped by its own climates, predators, migrations, and relationships with people. Even close kin can become beautifully different when history works on them in separate continents for long enough. Bison can look calm right before exploding into motion. That contrast is part of what makes them so compelling and so dangerous to underestimate. A bison may be standing still, head low, eyes seemingly unfocused, giving every impression of heaviness and patience. Then something changes in an instant. The body gathers, the legs drive, and all that apparent stillness turns into sudden speed. It feels almost unfair to human expectations. We are trained to read calm as harmless and slowness as safety. Bison do not obey those assumptions. Their stillness is not weakness, and their quiet is not consent. It is simply another state that can vanish without warning. That is one reason experienced people treat them with such respect. The transformation from rest to movement is not gradual enough to negotiate with. By the time you have realized the change has begun, the animal is already operating on its own terms. Few sights on the prairie are more startling than mass becoming motion all at once. People often underestimate how fast danger can arrive near bison. The mistake usually begins in the mind long before anything happens. A person sees a broad, furry animal grazing or standing at ease and unconsciously sorts it into the category of large but manageable, almost like livestock in a scenic setting. That mental shortcut is exactly what gets people into trouble. Danger near a bison does not always announce itself with a long build-up. It can arrive in seconds because the animal does not need much time to cover ground once it commits. This makes the margin for error frighteningly small. One bad decision about distance, one photo taken too close, one moment of misplaced confidence, and the story changes at once. The fascinating part is how completely the animal defeats human assumptions. It looks ancient, heavy, and almost meditative, yet it can respond with startling speed and force. In that gap between appearance and reality, lies one of the most important lessons the species teaches us. National parks warn visitors because bison injuries happen every year. The warnings are not there for atmosphere, and they are not overly cautious theatre designed to frighten tourists. They exist because year after year people get too close, read the animal badly, and are injured as a result. That recurring pattern says something important about the bison. Even in a landscape full of signs, rules, and public education, this animal still resists being turned into a harmless attraction. Visitors often want the perfect photograph, the thrilling close encounter, or the illusion that wildness will politely tolerate them if they mean no harm. Bison answer that illusion with reality. A shove, a toss, a charge, and suddenly the gap between scenic wildlife and actual power becomes brutally clear. There is also something sadly revealing in how often this happens. Humans keep bringing the wrong expectations to the encounter. The animal keeps reminding them that it belongs to an older set of rules, and those rules do not bend for anyone's vacation. A bison's calm gaze can hide immense, unpredictable power. There is something almost deceptive in the face. The eyes can seem soft, even distant, as though the animal is occupied with thoughts no human could interrupt. That look encourages projection. People want to see gentleness, patience, or even indifference. Yet behind that still expression is an animal equipped with enormous muscular force, sharp decision-making, and instincts formed in a world where quick response could mean survival. The eyes do not advertise any of that. They simply look outward with a composure that can lull the unwary into forgetting what the rest of the body is capable of. That tension between expression and ability makes the animal unforgettable. It feels like a lesson in not trusting appearances too easily. Wild power does not always arrive with visible rage. Sometimes it stands there breathing, looking almost serene, while a whole engine of muscle and instinct waits beneath the surface. The gaze is calm. The reality behind it is immense. Dust bathing helps bison manage parasites and skin irritation. When a bison drops to the ground and rolls in loose soil, the scene can look playful, even a little absurd, but the action serves real purposes. Dust can help dry the coat, work into the fur, and make life harder for insects and other external pests trying to remain on the skin. It can also soothe irritation, especially during warmer months when biting flies and other tormentors become relentless. In that sense, a dust bath is not only behavior, it is body care on the prairie, a way of using the land itself to answer discomfort. What makes it so fascinating is the scale of the image. A huge animal throws itself into the earth to deal with tiny attackers and minor irritations, turning a patch of dirt into a kind of treatment. The move feels ancient and practical at the same time. On the plains, even comfort can be improvised from soil, and the bison knows exactly how to do it. Bulls sometimes wallow more intensely during the breeding season. In the rut, ordinary behavior can acquire a new level of urgency and meaning. A wallow is no longer only a place to roll, dust, or relieve irritation. For breeding bulls, it can become part of the whole performance of dominance, presence, and competition. They may roll with more force, tear up the ground more dramatically, and cover themselves in dust and scent in ways that seem almost ritualized. This helps turn the body itself into a signal. The dust-coated bull looks larger, rougher, and more charged, as if the season has pushed even his relationship with the ground into display. That added intensity makes the wallow feel less like a simple hollow and more like a stage. The prairie becomes marked by the emotions of the rut, and the bulls write some of that tension directly into the soil. In breeding season, even rolling in dirt can become part of the language of rivalry and attraction. Their sense of smell helps them read, herd, and season. For humans, the prairie often arrives first, through sight. For a bison, smell is part of how the world becomes legible. Scents drifting through the air or left on the ground can carry information about other bison, reproductive condition, recent presence, and the changing state of the season itself. In the breeding period especially, smell becomes a powerful guide, helping animals interpret who is nearby and what stage the herd has entered. That makes the bison world richer and more layered than it appears from the outside. What looks to us like open space may be full of messages invisible to human senses. A patch of ground, a body, a breeze crossing the herd, all can carry information that shapes decisions. It is one more reminder that the species is reading the prairie in ways we only partly understand. The land is not silent. It is scented with signals, and the animals move through that hidden stream of knowledge. Bison calves turn darker as their bright baby coats fade. The change happens gradually enough that you might miss its meaning if you saw it unfold day by day. A newborn begins life wearing that startling orange-red coat that makes it stand out so vividly against the darker adults. Then, as weeks pass and the calf grows stronger, the color begins to shift. The brightness fades. Darker tones settle in. The little spark in the herd starts to look more like a true member of the larger body around it. There is something quietly beautiful in that transformation. It feels like a visible passage from arrival into belonging. The coat itself seems to record the first stage of life, then let it go. By the time the young animal is more capable of keeping pace, the eye-catching color of infancy is already giving way to the earthier shades of herd life. Growth, in this case, is written directly on the body, and the prairie watches the calf darken into itself. Harsh winters do not weaken bison as quickly as cattle. This difference has shaped human attitudes toward the species for a very long time. In severe cold, with wind cutting across open ground and forage buried under snow, cattle can struggle in ways that bison often do not. The wild grazer is built for this world from the skin outward. Its coat, metabolism, body proportions, and behavior all fit the demands of the northern plains and parklands. Cattle, by contrast, come from a different history, one shaped more heavily by domestication and human support. That means the same winter can produce very different results. What wears down one kind of bovine may barely interrupt the other. This is part of what makes bison seem so deeply native to the continent. They are not just surviving here. They are operating within conditions that helped define them. A hard winter can expose the gap between a domestic animal placed on the land and a wild one that evolved with it. Their bodies are built for movement, cold, and sparse forage. Everything about the animal begins to make sense once you see it as a product of open country and hard seasons. The massive front end gives power where digging, pushing, and endurance matter most. The coat manages cold. The digestive system extracts value from tough, fibrous plants. The legs carry all that weight over long distances. Even the social behavior fits a world where movement and exposure are constant themes. None of this feels accidental. The body reads like a set of answers to recurring problems. How do you keep feeding when the land is covered? How do you cross wide spaces in search of better conditions? How do you endure winter without human shelter or stored feed? The answer, in bison form, is a creature built less for comfort than for function. It is not elegant in a delicate way. It is elegant in the way a well-adapted machine is elegant, every part serving life under pressure. Bison can rest in storms with snow collecting on their backs. Few images capture their relationship with winter more powerfully than this one. The storm is blowing, the air is bitter, and the animal remains where it is. lying or standing with a calm that seems almost impossible while snow gathers on the outer coat. To a human eye, it can look like suffering, as though the animal has been overwhelmed by weather. In reality, that snow can be a sign that the insulating layers beneath are doing their work. Heat is not pouring outward fast enough to melt everything on contact. The body is holding warmth where it needs it most. That makes the scene feel almost magical. A storm that would drive people toward shelter becomes something the animal can inhabit without panic. The bison does not need to look dramatic to be extraordinary. Sometimes all it has to do is stay where it is, wrapped in its own design, and let the snow settle while the winter fails to break it. In open country, herds can seem to flow like weather. From a distance, a large moving herd does not always read as separate individuals. It can appear more like a dark front crossing the land, a spreading pressure, a living system, advancing with its own pace and shape. Bodies rise and dip over ground contours. Dust lifts behind them. The line thickens, thins, bends, and reforms. That is why the comparison to weather feels so right. A herd does not merely occupy the prairie. It changes the mood of the prairie while it moves through it. It brings sound, density, and momentum that can make the landscape itself feel altered. For people who once lived closely with these movements, the arrival of a herd must have carried some of the same emotional force as the arrival of a storm, except this storm had breath, eyes, and muscle. It was not only a spectacle, it was consequence in motion, changing what the land would look like after it had passed. Modern indigenous-led restoration is changing the future of bison. One of the most important developments in the species' modern story is that restoration is increasingly being led by the very peoples whose histories with bison reach back far beyond colonial conservation. Tribal nations and indigenous communities across North America are bringing animals back to their lands, shaping herd management according to ecological goals, cultural values, and long-held responsibilities. That shift matters profoundly. It means the future of the species is being guided not only by biology or bureaucracy, but also by living relationships that were never truly extinguished. The return is therefore richer than a standard wildlife project. It becomes an act of renewal, sovereignty, and historical repair. When an indigenous-led herd steps back onto tribal land, the event carries weight at many levels at once. It is ecological restoration, yes, but it is also the restoration of relationship, decision-making, and continuity that the long era of bison destruction once tried to sever. Returning bison can also return language, ceremony, and connection. When a species so central to culture comes back, it can reactivate more than habitat. Words that belong to older patterns of life become newly relevant. Ceremonies tied to the animal gain fresh immediacy. Teachings that once risked becoming historical memory alone can again be linked to living presence on the land. This is one of the most beautiful aspects of bison restoration. The return can nourish people as well as ecosystems, reconnecting younger generations with stories, practices, and ways of understanding that are stronger when the animal is physically there. In that sense, restoration reaches into the fabric of community life. It does not stop at fences or grazing plans. It moves into identity, belonging, and memory carried forward. A language can speak more fully when the beings it names are nearby. A ceremony can feel different when it addresses an animal that once more walks the same land as the people who honor it. Some tribes now manage herds on lands where bison vanished long ago. That fact carries a special emotional force because it joins return with responsibility. In places where the animal had been absent for generations, tribal nations are now rebuilding herds, making management decisions, and restoring a presence that earlier history tried to erase. This is not simply symbolic. It involves infrastructure, ecological planning, veterinary care, cultural guidance, and long-term commitment. The animal does not just reappear. It is welcomed back through work. That makes each herd a kind of future-making act. A landscape once emptied of bison begins again to hold them because people chose to re-establish that bond in practical terms. There is something deeply moving in the reversal. The same broad story that once carried removal and loss can, in specific places, begin to carry return and stewardship instead. The land changes. The people change with it. And a missing relationship becomes living reality once more under tribal care. Bison are a conservation success story that is still unfinished. It would be satisfying to end the story with pure triumph, to say the species was nearly lost and is now safely restored. But the truth is more complicated and more honest. Bison have survived a catastrophe that might easily have ended them, and their numbers are far better than they once were. That is real success. Yet many herds remain fenced, many landscapes remain too fragmented for large-scale movement, and many restoration goals remain only partly fulfilled. Questions of wildness, genetics, disease, habitat, and governance are still very much alive. This unfinished quality does not weaken the story. It strengthens it, because it reminds us that conservation is not a single rescue followed by permanent safety. It is an ongoing relationship with choices, trade-offs, and responsibilities that do not end when the numbers improve. The bison has come back from the brink. The deeper work now is deciding what kind of comeback we are willing to support. To watch a bison herd move is to see history alive. There are moments when the distance between past and present seems to collapse, and this is one of them. A herd crossing open ground does not feel like a modern spectacle in the ordinary sense. It feels like a fragment of older North America breaking through into the present, carrying with it echoes of lost abundance, indigenous lifeways, prairie ecology, westward destruction, and hard-won survival. The bodies moving now are alive in the present, yet they also make visible an older continent that still exists in traces. That is why the sight can be so affecting. It is not nostalgia exactly, because the animals are real and immediate. But it does stir the sense that one is witnessing something time almost managed to erase. Few wildlife encounters carry that much historical weight in motion. The herd is not only crossing the land, it is carrying memory across it, turning grass and distance into a living form of remembrance. Few animals have shaped a continent more deeply than bison. Their influence ran through ecology, culture, economy, history, and imagination at a scale that is difficult to match. They shaped grasslands through feeding, movement, trails, wallows, and nutrients. They shaped human societies through food, shelter, tools, trade, ceremony, and migration. They shaped modern history through their destruction, their near disappearance, and the enormous moral reckoning that followed. Even now, they continue to shape debates about restoration, wildness, land use, and indigenous sovereignty. That range of influence is what makes the species feel so large in meaning, even beyond its physical size. Some animals are important within one system. Bison reached into many at once. They helped define the character of the plains, the memory of the continent, and the possibilities of repair in the present. To understand them fully is to realize that they were never just one more impressive mammal. They were, and still are, one of North America's great shaping forces. As our journey with the bison begins to draw to a close, we can let the great shape of their story settle softly in the mind. Tonight, we followed them across deep time and open country. We met them as giants of the plains, powerful enough to shake the ground beneath them, yet shaped just as much by snow, grass, wind, and patience. We watched them move through blizzards, roll in dust, guard their calves, clash in the rut, and spread life across the prairie simply by eating, walking, and resting. We traced their path through ancient worlds, through the lives of indigenous nations, through devastation, survival, and return. And perhaps most moving of all, we saw that they are not only survivors, but restorers, bringing old rhythms back to the land wherever they return. There is something deeply calming about that. The image of a dark herd moving slowly across evening grass, the hush of snow gathering on a broad back, the low sweep of a head through winter drifts, the warm red glow of a calf beside its mother. These are ancient motions, steady and unhurried, carrying the feeling of a world that is older, wider, and quieter than the one we usually live in. And now, you can let all of that drift gently into the distance. If you enjoyed this journey, you might like to join me again for the next video waiting for you on screen, if you happen to still be awake. And if these slow wanderings through science and wonder bring you some peace, you can always like, subscribe, or share a thought below, so others can find their way here too. But for now, let your body grow heavy. Let your breathing slow. And let the plains grow dark and still around you. Sleep well, and good night.